Hello, and welcome to my channel. If you are someone who employs who I sent over here, someone scouting me out for work, or someone who's considering partnering with me based on my work, then you started off in the right place. Chances are I sent you here as a creative portfolio, and you don't really know why you've been sent to a YouTube channel. So I guess to get started, well, what is this channel? So currently, it's a channel that wants to try gaming and entertainment. But for you, in particular, that's not really the focus this time around. What's more important is what happened before, and some things during, depending on who you are. And so this video was made specifically for you to help you navigate through the channel. So let's talk about the idea behind the channel before we get into things. So, when making the channel, there was, well, one idea behind it was the question of how do I demonstrate skills that would be hard to show on a resume? So for instance, creativity, problem solving, personality, things, and other things. It's really hard to put it down on a piece of paper. Or it's really hard to actually get secondhand information of these traits or these qualities and get an accurate representation of who a person is. So it's really better to get firsthand experience by, well, showing how creative a person could be, well, by demonstrating how well they are at problem solving. Or you could just see who they are, better than what you could get from another person who could be biased, or from just just writing from a piece of paper. Apologies. Don't know what's going on with the stuttering. So this channel was designed in a manner to demonstrate said skills on a platform that preserves videos, rather than using it for mainstream content creation. So YouTube nowadays is mainly made kind of to make it big, I guess, or that's just the general image of YouTube. However, I didn't really want that at the time. I wanted to make it so I could preserve videos. And so I put myself out there so then I have physical hard evidence of certain skills that I have, and I could demonstrate that these are some skills that I have. So I've been talking a lot about skills. I guess the question is, what are these skills? So here are the skills in question that I'll be discussing. So I talk about YouTube and new mediums, practice and learning, insight and psychology, creative works, video games and games in general, and entertainment. Now, since I know that it's possible that someone could come from anywhere and might not necessarily need all of this information, I've created timestamps so you could skip around to the parts you need. And so you could just hop around on the bar and see which sections that you are really interested in. Or if you want a really short version of what the channel is and just want to get it done over with, I have an entire playlist called New Here Are the Things You Missed playlist. And so that is everything, kind of what I felt was big and important to the channel. And so I will I'll put a card for the playlist right there. And you may navigate it and see what interests you, and well, hopefully you could find some sort of answer there. But if you're along for the ride, then I guess we should get started. So the first skill I want to address surrounds YouTube and new mediums. So what YouTube and video creation has done for me is it allowed me to learn new tools. So before YouTube, I had minimal video experience prior to YouTube, so it was something that I had to learn basically from scratch. And there are a few components to this that I had to learn. So first off was hardware. I had to learn how computers would work, how cameras and filming would work, and microphones as well. So a lot of those technical, well, I say hardware because it's the physical, generally. But not only that, but I also had to deal with working with software as well, so things within a computer. So that'd be recording videos and then editing videos and editing photos, which often lead to thumbnails of videos. So I had to learn all those skills in order to help me out in the video making process. Now, I should state that I don't really intend to go into video making, so not a lot of my skills are far in depth, but it is another skill to have. It's a skill under my belt and might come in handy. And I also note that, hey, life could take you anywhere. I don't expect to go into video filming, but depending on how things go, sometimes you can't really choose what you want to work with. And so video editing is kind of there as a safety net of sorts. But in the broad sense of things, learning YouTube and kind of the new medium, it's proof of adaptation, and this is a really important one for kind of the workforce. So just to iterate, I've had minimal experience with video making. And so I had to learn everything from scratch and to become, well, the video maker currently here. So now, with producing a consistent load of videos every week, now I have a video log of my growth every 3 months. And you can actually see and observe where I've changed, where I've developed, where I've learned things. Because now these videos of literally anything has been kind of learning points for me. And now I'm still not done growing. I'm still learning new things. I still want to learn new things, and kind of as proof of that, I've moved into live streaming. So I've been streaming on Twitch and a bit on YouTube as well, and I swapped the two around, but the flow sounded better. But now I want to try out live streaming, see what that's like, and performing in front of a live audience. And so I'm not done growing, I'm still changing, and I'm still adapting. And this series of videos is proof of that. This channel is proof of that. So, if you want to see proof of this change, I did put up relevant content. So, essentially, if you really want to get into it, you could look at every video periodically to see growth. I've always worked on changes every time, so you could see where I've gone right, where I've gone wrong, how I've fixed those wrongs or attempted to. And so, really, you could just look at every video. But if you want kind of a more zoomed in, a more focused area of growth, I recommend the Necrodancer 3-part series. Of course, you don't need to watch the whole video. You could just click on it at a glance and see what it was like, but essentially the series started with me pretty much with all new gear and learning how I can work around that. And then, well, you'll see it's only 3 parts, but they're separated far enough where I've learned some things between the videos, and you'll see development and growth over the 3 videos. I really disliked producing the first one. I did not want to release the first one, but after the third, I can assure you there is a lot of growth that came alongside that. The next kind of playlist I want to recommend to you is Stream of Thoughts. So Stream of Thoughts is a weekly video / live stream I do where I talk about the things I've engaged with in the past week. Most of the time. You'll have to look at what I discuss, but uh, a lot. Most of what I discuss are kind of current issues I'm facing with, things I want to do in the future, things like that. So it's literally a stream of my thoughts, where you could see and observe my thought process of video making or producing videos and whatnot, and hopefully you could gauge a sense of how I grow, how I learn, how I identify problems through there. Now finally, this one is an interesting one, the Hollow Knight playlist. So Hollow Knight is kind of what I consider to be my biggest long-term project on the channel thus far, and it's kind of a culmination of all my work and what it's kind of surmounted to. So, I mean, you don't have to go over the whole thing, but it's my take on a quote-unquote professional video would look like. Although, of course, there are some things that I can't really change, such as quality, just because of resources, but it's a combination of what I've learned and its application into what a video would look like. And so they're all put together into this project. So if you want to check that out, then go right on ahead to see the finished not the final product, but kind of what 3 months of work has led me to. Now the next kind of set of skills I want to talk about is practicing and learning. It's a bit of an odd one, I know, but I didn't really know where to parse it, I guess. So for instance, I put here, showing off intelligence. Going back to the resume example, it's hard to kind of put in your level of intelligence onto a piece of paper. You could talk about the education you've had, sure, and that generally signs intelligence, but what about other things? So for instance, languages. It's hard to, you can put that you can speak on a conversational level, I'd assume, but how in depth, how far does it go? How in depth does it go? So I've made videos based on language, and I'm not the most skilled linguist, for sure, but it's there to show a more realistic example of what I could do, rather than stretching the truth or shrinking it. There's also, in terms of intelligence levels and puzzle solving. So you could put their problem or puzzle solver on a resume, but really it doesn't mean anything. Well, it's hard to decipher what that means, unless you actually bring yourself to solve puzzles. And, what do you know? I used the channel to make videos, and I've solved puzzles. So, at least there's some first-hand experience of what my method of thinking is like. Finally is music. So, I wouldn't say that I'm a professional musician or desire to be a professional musician that plays concerts and whatnot, but I could at least read off sheet music, and that's what I wanted to show through the channel. But there is a bit more to, practicing and learning skills that I want to talk about, and that is kind of my internal personal skills. So these are kind of things that aren't really written per se, or kind of hard to write. So for instance, routines and consistency. I am a routine and schedule focused person, and I arranged the channel specifically so it could accommodate for that routine and consistency. I'll get to that later as an example. Next up, I'll group these together as voice and improvisation. So, how does my voice sound? Now, I actually don't really know how my voice truly sounds, but it might be something to be taken into consideration. And improvisation as well. So I'm presenting this with minimal notes. All I have are these slides in front of me. And really, I'm not making things up as I go. I've practiced once or twice, but now you could see my improvisational skills in here and in other videos of how I talk, how I communicate. Communication is a very important quality to have in, well, a lot of jobs, and so I would put that up there. And I also put here other passive qualities. Now, I don't know what specifically you may be looking for, and even I may not know, but by putting myself out there as me, at least now you have grounds of observing me. You may have questions, you may, well, gather insights about me that I haven't even thought of myself. And so I put myself up there so you could, well, observe me. So what are some, what content is relevant? There we go. Those are the words I'm looking for. To, if you want to ascertain these sorts of things. Well, the first piece I'd recommend is the Whitwork playlist. So a lot of these are me trying to work through puzzles of various sorts. I also have 2 videos in which I work on my language. So I have one where I put, well, basic level Japanese, so I work through my daily schedule, which I'm still working on. I also have one where I speak entirely in French, because I want to demonstrate the level of French speaking that I do. Also, in addition to that, we also have puzzles I solve. So I believe I've done logic puzzles and jigsaws. Actually, I believe that's everything in the playlist at this point in time. So you could see kind of how I problem solve, how I think. The next thing I'd recommend is the Stream of Thoughts playlist. Now, I will be repeating a lot of what I've said before just because some people might be hopping around, but essentially the Stream of Thoughts playlist is a playlist where I discuss my thoughts on, well, my work of the week, essentially, most of the time. But here you could actually see my level of thinking, my communication, level of knowledge, awareness, things like that, and you'll see how, or what I think about approaching the video making process. So it's a really handy tool to actually see, well, my stream of thoughts. Now, if you're here for music specifically, I do have my own music playlist where I often play covers from video game music. Pretty straightforward, you could check them out. As I said, I'm not a professional, I'm not the best, but I could play notes, I could play tunes that I enjoy off of sheet paper, and so I kind of demonstrate those skills here. And finally, I have here a schedule-based system. Now, I mentioned before that I am routine focused, and I want to demonstrate and show that. And so I specifically created this channel so I could follow said routine. So every Tuesdays and Thursdays, I upload a video at noon. And that hasn't stopped for the past 3 months, with the exception of one day. And then every Saturday, every Saturday evening, I'd have a stream, or alternatively, Sunday afternoon at noon. Well, Sunday noon, I would have a video, depending on which era you are at, of a stream of thoughts. And that's also kind of continued onto my live streaming schedule, where I stream every Tuesday and Thursdays at 10:30 a.m. And once again, hasn't changed. And so at least now you could see my thoughts and mentality that I am schedule focused, because I do not break schedule. The next topic I wanted to talk about is insight and psychology. So, I should mention this up front. You probably know this, but I got a Bachelor of Science in Psychology. And so, it does mean a lot to me and kind of what I know and the level of knowledge I have. But if you want me to be more specific, well, many people think of psychology as therapy or neuroscience, but I prefer to use psychology in social settings. So it's helpful in learning about individual thoughts and perspectives. It gives insights to, well, me and myself. As two separate people, of course. That was a joke. But also works with dealing with group thoughts and comes in handy when it comes to assessment of people or myself. And now, combined with insight, which is a skill that is really hard to demonstrate on paper, but now I know how to apply these concepts. I have psychological knowledge, and so I could, well, help myself, help other people, and so now I know how to work towards accommodating them as well. So I generally know how people work. Psychology isn't mind reading, but it's general thinking. Now, of course, there is an issue I do need to highlight, and it's that psychology actually works with, well, people to interact with, but at this point in time, the channel hasn't really taken off, and I don't really see it. Well, it's difficult for it to take off, and I don't really see it taking off in the near future, or at any point in the future. But who knows? So that is something worth noting. Speaking of things worth noting, not clickbaiting. As I said, a lot of videos on YouTube are focused on content creation, and they focus on kind of the art of clickbaiting to lure people into watching their videos. And technically, I could do the same if I really wanted to. Because psychologically speaking, it works. But I will say that it's not me. If I were to get people, I'd rather do it my own way with my own means rather than following the main trend and not really knowing how it works, even though I do know how it works, but I would rather use other means. And so that's why I don't just use psychology to my advantage to just pull people in. Well, I don't approve of it, so I don't do it. So what are some examples on the channel of, well, insight and psychology? As I said, there's not really a great way to show it off, but I do have some things that could help. So the first video I'd probably say is representation, or representation if you like. Now this is one where I recreate kind of a seminar I did in psychology. And so if you want kind of my more factual knowledge and where I've ascertained this, I only have one right now, and it's one I've done in a class of human nature. And so if you want to check that out for just video knowledge or video proof of my knowledge of psychology, there we go. You could check that out and see what I do. Next thing I'd recommend is the Stream of Thoughts playlist. I bring up the Stream of Thoughts a lot, but basically it's kind of my thought process in working through video making and content creation. And kind of why I made the channel the way it is. And so that's there just because it can help you kind of get a glimpse of where I'm thinking. And so this is kind of more the insightful side, like where I'm thinking, how I want to approach things, and why I would do it that way. So the Stream of Thoughts playlist, most of them are actually kind of show you how, well, show you how I think. Now finally, these next bits of content aren't really videos or playlists per se, but there's something worth noting. So for instance, my schedule-based system. So I created these videos based on the schedule. Not only does it show that I'm routinely, but it's also, well, psychologically beneficial for gathering an audience. If people like consistency, and so by uploading videos every Tuesday, Thursday noon, and streaming every Saturday evening, I've created a nice, well, harmonic piece where, since people like schedules, routines, and I've made the channel focused on that schedule and routine, it's more easier for people to actually, well, subscribe, not literally subscribe, but subscribe to content. Now, of course, garnering an audience is its own separate issues, but it would help people stay, just from a psychological base. Next, I also have here mentality and motive. So this is more in regards to me making the channel and my approach of making the channel. So this kind of brings out more the insightful side. So, and kind of raises the question of my level of thinking. So, for instance, a part of the reason I made the channel initially was just, how do I show things that I can't show? And so that's why I decided that I would just make a channel so I could show it firsthand. And so by doing that, I actually created a way where I can actually make stuff and it actually works towards something. And so that was kind of my motive, and well, that was where my insight got me towards. Now, of course, as I said before, this works better with actual people in terms of psychology and insight. But, well, I don't have that right now at the moment, but maybe in the future. And there you could actually get proof. Perhaps some future videos might be able to help determine where I am in that instance. Now next up is creative works. And I will highlight this a bunch. Creativity does not mean much on paper. Creativity can mean literally anything or virtually nothing as just a resume filler. But for me, creativity is really important. For me, creativity is it's fun to do, and there's so many different ways of doing it. Being creative is, well, an enjoyable experience for me. It's also a mental workout as well. It's a good way to demonstrate mental flexibility and exercise. And so that's why I put it up on the channel, because you could be creative in so many ways. You can do it in so many ways. And so putting it up there means now actually has meaning. Now, not only do I show that I love kind of creative endeavors, but I could show the depth of those creative possibilities. So I'm willing to involve myself in a variety of creative situations. So you'll see through the examples, I put myself in a lot of creative situations and have done different things with it in different mediums as well. So with this, now I could show proof of resourcefulness, that I could work with whatever I'm given and get creative with what I have. And so, as I mentioned before, working with multiple mediums, I can do that. So let's look at some relevant content. So the big important one is the creative mode playlist. This is where I put up all of my creative works, all of the things that kind of are, I guess, creative for lack of a better word, which is ironic, but that's besides the point. But creative mode playlist is kind of where I've worked with multiple mediums to actually produce some form of creative work. There aren't a lot of videos on it at the moment, but give it time and more things will come. Or maybe there is a lot of things there at the moment, depending on at what point you come here. Next, I would suggest the Stream of Thoughts playlist. So this playlist, since I've been over this 4 other times, I believe, just focuses on my thought processes and mentalities. And so here you could possibly observe of how I problem solve. In a way, creativity and problem solving work hand in hand, but well, with Stream of Thoughts, you could actually get an in-depth view of how I think. And finally, mentality and motive. I mean, this one feels a bit odd. Well, I mean, this whole channel has been an entire creative process in of itself. I mean, from what I've seen, it's not often that people create or dedicate a YouTube channel towards, well, actually showing that they're creative or just to demonstrate their skill. So I'd hope that because of this one approach I have to the channel, there are other motives as to why I made the channel, but I'd like to think that it is pretty creative that I actually used a video sharing medium to actually demonstrate skills. And through its use, and through what I've done through it, and perhaps through things in video editing and whatnot, that I could actually show that I'm creative. Now, next up is video games and just games in general. Now, I love games, I guess, to put it bluntly. It's kind of gone beyond a hobby for me, and it's something I love deeply. Now, if you're here, specifically, I should mention that I don't think I'll play video games for skill. Ooh, typo there. But I don't think I'm too skilled at video games, but that's kind of not what I want to focus myself on. But rather something else. So I put here I love anything about video games, and games in general, I should mention. I do go beyond video games, it's just hard to display that interest on here. But that aside, I love pointing things out in games, such as music, art direction, writing, game mechanics, and I'd love to point them out because people might not know how important they are to a game. And so when playing through a game, I'll always indicate, hey, I like this part. Or, well, I like this aspect of it. Or I like the music in there. It's kind of why I like playing video game music, for instance, because I just love music. And of course, I'm not just a scholar of games, I also just enjoy games for showcasing fun and entertainment as well, which is still important for a game. Now, not only that, but I also kind of wanted to depict kind of my interest in games for the future. Because I believe that games can go beyond, well, what they are now. So for instance, games as an artistic medium, or games for development and psychological. So for instance, psychological means. Or also help for physical therapy, for instance. Games for learning, which has kind of happened, although not quite as effective as of yet. And of course, for further fun. So through the channel, I kind of want to point out these things and help, well, promote games as having a better image than what it is at this point in time. And so this channel is kind of there to show kind of my passion for games in general. So what are some relevant content that could help you see this? Now, the first thing is a really interesting one. I'm forgetting the name of the video, but I called it Games and Guns, I believe. Or I'll just correct myself in post. Where, I mean, you don't really need to focus on the content too much, but it's me using the medium of a video game to talk about video game violence. And so it's, well, using a video game as a creative means of, in this case, learning. So that's what I want to propose, or the specific video I want to propose. Next up is the one-off games playlist. There are a lot of games I play, and there's a lot of thoughts and feelings that I share on it, so if there's a game you want to check out, then that would be the place to go. Next up is the Hollow Knight playlist. So this is my real first blind playthrough of a game, and I talk about the mechanics I love, talk about music I enjoy, the atmosphere. Definitely one to check out if you want to see me kind of gush about a beloved game that I know nothing about. And other than that, just anything I'm currently doing right now. Unless things have changed, I'm planning on making gaming content because it's what I love. It's what I want other people to love, and so I'll probably be doing it at this point in time. Also, you can check me over on Twitch as well. I believe you could find me quite easily if you're at this point, but I do stream gaming over there as well, so you can check out my views and just general outlook on games right over there. Now, the final topic I want to talk about is entertainment. And this is one that's a bit new. I was a bit hesitant to put this on, but I decided to anyways. Well, once again, with being entertaining, it's hard to really put on a piece of paper unless you have experience, which is a tricky situation for me. But I have performed a fair bit in front of a large audience. So I've done it from a range of edutainment in a class to stage performances and acting. And so by using the channel, now I get to show it off firsthand that this is me. Well, acting is a bit, it's too far of a word, but actually presenting and performing, those are better words, I'd say. But, well, this is still work in progress, I point out. For me, I'm still trying to get used to the fact that I'm just talking to a mic in front of, at this point in time, nobody. But I'd assume that with an audience that I'd get better legs and would be able to perform, since I've been able to do that in the past. So I don't see that really changing in the future. Should be worth noting that I am not an over-the-top character, and I don't really want to be, and it's, well, not me. I don't need to be that. If I want to find people, it's best to approach it as myself. I mean, of course, things might be exaggerated to an extent. No, I haven't really exaggerated. But I put myself out there as me. I guess project myself would be the better word. I project myself. And so that's what I do as the form of entertainment. I'm putting myself out there. Now, if you want relevant content of me presenting and performing, the first one I'd recommend is representation or representation. So this is me. This is more the edutainment side where I talk about kind of a psychological concept in human nature, but through the whole thing, I was performing as, well, the embodiment of death itself, because it fit with what I was presenting. And so that's a good way to show, I guess, edutainment for about, I forget how long the video is, but and perhaps there are other videos in that play or in that kind of other representation or representation videos as well, but there hasn't been any at this point, so there's only one. Next up is the Hollow Knight playlist. This is one where this is kind of a culmination of what practice has led me to. And so Hollow Knight is kind of my first long-term big production, I would say, where I actually put myself in experiencing a game for the first time. And so a lot of my reactions, thoughts are, well, new and fresh. And so there's kind of that unexperienced entertainment side as opposed to representation, which is more practice. The practice kind of side. And of course, anything recent would be able to show you where I am at the point of entertainment. And, well, there's always more things to come. I don't plan on stopping, but of course the future may have other things in store, but I still want to keep being an entertaining influence to people. And so I'll keep doing this. And so, with all the skills covered, guess we have to conclude this so-called presentation. So, in closing, I made this channel as a creative portfolio, showing things that would be difficult to prove otherwise to help me work towards a future. Evidence talks, so I use this channel to showcase myself and my ability firsthand. So from simple things like video showcases to applying insight to the channel and its layout, I was able to demonstrate a fair assortment of skills that would be hard to show in a real life situation. And so at this point, 3 months of my work has culminated into these series of video logs. And the things I've made have been an application of who I am and what I could do. Well, shows a part of my identity. And so this concludes what I call chapter 1 of the channel. I wanted to show people what I'm capable of working on, or how I work, what I do. And so working on this aspect would, well, actually help me work towards my future. But now, I still want to keep doing this channel to help push forward other plans on my agenda. But for you, or for this audience in particular, well, I mean, you could perhaps see how much I've changed and grown in the future, but you'll see that this is kind of the end of where I wanted, well, my work to go towards in the first place. So, well, thank you for stopping by. Thank you for your time and attention. And I do hope that we will see, well, each other again in the near future.